Hello everyone, welcome to this online panel on Bitcoin for institutions, the most promising use cases for financial institutions and corporations. I am Alexandre Lézé, Digital Assets Payments Lead for France and Benelux at Accenture, leading the Web3 banking and payments offering within our Accenture Global Blockchain, Digital Assets, and Digital Currencies global team, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. Paris Blockchain Society is a non-profit organization bringing together young professionals and leaders of the blockchain ecosystem. Our objectives include the promotion of blockchain technology through conferences and training through masterclasses, and we are open to applications if you're interested. Our panel for today is composed of Jay Bluestein, Managing Principal at Blue Square Wealth and Blue Square Digital, Christian Catalini, Co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer at Lightspark, Obi Nwosu, Chief Executive Officer at Fedi, Julia Dawson, Chief Operating Officer at River, Ryan Gentry, Business Development Director at Lightning Labs. And the event goal for today is to understand what are the most promising Bitcoin use cases, as mentioned for financial institutions and multinational corporations, and how to position in this environment as an institution, addressing as well key challenges and mitigating risks. So there will be two parts for today, one more of an inspiration and another one more on the implementation, concrete applications. But before going into the details of the discussion, let's start with a panel introduction and maybe start with Jay, if you want to give a quick introduction.
Sure. My name is Jay Bluestein, and I'm the managing principal and CIO for Blue Square. We run a digital asset division, amongst others, and we're a risk manager. So we've been in the Bitcoin ecosystem now since 2020, and looking forward to a very interesting and educational discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Christian?
Christian Catalini. I'm one of the co-founders of Lightspark. I've been in crypto for over 10 years. Started at MIT when we did the MIT Bitcoin experiment in 2013-14. Then was one of the co-founders of a project known as Libra, then Diem, and now back to basics, back to Bitcoin to build on the truly open protocol for money.
Thank you, Christian. Obi?
Hello, my name is Obi Nwosu. I am one of the co-founders and CEO of Fedi. You've heard of Bitcoin. I believe you've heard of Lightning. It's just a scaling layer for Bitcoin. Fedi is a company that accelerates adoption of another technology called FediMint, which we believe is the missing piece of the Bitcoin ecosystem. It scales it from tens of millions, which is what Lightning does, to billions of users worldwide. Prior to that, I have been in the Bitcoin space for over a decade. I ran one of the longest running Bitcoin exchanges in Europe.
Thank you, Obi. Julia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Duzon, the COO of River. I spent about a decade in banking and fintech before seeing the light, getting an MBA from Stanford and coming to work in Bitcoin and at River full time. River offers Bitcoin brokerage, custody, wallet, as well as hosted mining, primarily for US consumers, also internationally for businesses, institutions, as well as high net worth individuals. We also have an international Bitcoin payments business, which is focused on the Lightning Network. We make it really easy for other apps and exchanges to plug into the Lightning Network. We have some exciting companies as customers, including public companies, as well as the government of El Salvador, where River powers the Lightning integration for the country's Chivo wallet.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Ryan?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Gentry. I'm the head of business development at Lightning Labs. At Lightning Labs, we're building the open source software that powers the vast majority of the Lightning Network. I've been here for the last 3 years. It's been a really, really, really exciting time to see the Lightning Network go from a bunch of hackers and hobbyists to now entities like Julia just mentioned, as the government of El Salvador, Square and Cash App, public companies like that. And as of kind of last Monday, Binance, the biggest exchange in the crypto space. So it's been a really exciting time for Lightning, seeing the growth, seeing kind of the value proposition of an open source money transfer network, competing with and disrupting kind of the card networks. and really excited to chat with you today about how we're pushing the next frontiers forward, bringing Bitcoin to billions, as Obi said, and making sure that anybody anywhere can send money just like they can send a text message today. So excited to be here, and thanks for having us, Alexandra.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you all for being here. Just before going into the core of the subject, feel free to ask in the audience your questions in the comments, and we will make sure to cover them as we go. Thank you so much. So maybe to start with a first question, Jay, what are the most promising Bitcoin use cases you see for institutions? And how might this impact your institutional investment fund thesis?
Great question to start with. So I bucket the use cases into three categories. First is as an investment. Second, as a technology, or as I like to refer to as the Bitcoin's industrial use case. And the third subset would be, it's really a subset of the second, which would be banking the unbanked and giving people a way to opt out of poorly managed fiat regimes. And so from an investment standpoint, and without going down the rabbit hole, Bitcoin is actually a very simple asset to analyze, and it's a textbook sort of economics 101. So what changes when you have a fixed supply asset and demand increases, the price goes up. And so given the recent news with BlackRock filing of a spot ETF application, it's been making all the headlines, and sort of regardless of how long it takes in the US for that approval, it's such big news because as the largest asset manager in the world, they understand the level of institutional demand that's looking to get into Bitcoin. And they also understand, given its historical investment characteristics, that suggest the potential for continued outsized potential returns and non-correlation, that they're extremely important from a portfolio construction standpoint for obvious reasons. So from my main issues actually are Bitcoin's volatility as an institutional investor and how you custody it. And so we're in the business of Blue Square of addressing the volatility issue, and with custody being the other issue that I think still needs some work on in the industry. But clearly BlackRock is further validation of Bitcoin as an institutional asset class. From an industrial use case standpoint, and I would say specific to the financial services industry, as I mentioned before, custody is a very big opportunity and a challenge. I know that we've spent a significant amount of time thinking through how we're custodying our funds Bitcoin as fiduciaries and staying in the qualified ecosystem, but doing it in a way that'll protect us from losing access to the Bitcoin in case of a bankruptcy by the custodian. But there are clearly a host of other financial services opportunities that are going to drive demand from just generic asset management, and wealth management is a huge opportunity. We're focused on delivering solutions that can meet investors and other financial institutions where their customers are today, that look and feel like their existing offerings, and then as the ecosystem evolves over time, looking towards other offerings. I know River can talk about some of the interesting and exciting things Julia can that they're doing to push the envelope there. There's a lot of work to be done in the area of payments and settlements, including the cash management component that companies providing these services will face, but that's another huge opportunity. We see tokenization and digital and physical assets, including securities, bonds, and commodities, as being huge drivers. The Lightning Network, which we have a number of experts here to talk about. As the nodes grow, other members of this panel will certainly address it, as I said, but it's going to require a significant amount of institutional capital. And I think lending is a huge business. Clearly, the industry has been struggling with that to date, but it's maybe one of the biggest from a financial services aspect. And then to get back, and I think Obi could also probably talk to this a bit from a social aspect, but really banking the unbanked and bringing financial inclusion and those around the world who aren't currently able to access it or who want to opt out of their country's fiat regime is foundational to why Bitcoin was created. So just to get back to the beginning part, it's just a very simple issue of, as demand increases in this ecosystem, which it looks like from an institutional standpoint, we're about to go into another gear. that supports our fund thesis very nicely because we think it's an asset that has significant return characteristics over the next 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So we want to try to help people get exposure to it. And by reducing the volatility, that's what we're looking to do.
Fascinating. Thank you, Jay. Now maybe Christian, on what are the concrete use cases that you are working on with your institutional clients, and what concrete value will this unlock for their customers?
Yes, look, it was already mentioned, and I think over the last 10 years or so, there's been a lot of excitement around Bitcoin, the asset, right? This novel digital asset with special properties that unlocks a number of experiences and new use cases. But we at Lightspark believe that even less than necessary attention has been actually placed on Bitcoin, the network. That's an even more innovative component into the global picture, especially when you start thinking about payments. For decades, I think the internet and participants on the internet, whether traditional financial institutions or new fintechs or digital platforms, have been looking for a truly open protocol for moving value, whether it's cross-border or even domestically. We don't have one today, but we have a very good candidate. And we think that the Bitcoin network, especially when combined with Lightning, can solve a number of issues that enterprises of all size really experience when trying to move value between different entities, between different borders. Settlement beyond improvements on RTGS systems that have happened in specific domains and countries. Once you're going between different regions, are still fragmented, they're slow, they take a long time, and settlement is often not final, so you have counterparty risk. Now, what's great about Bitcoin is that it's this first truly native asset, and it can be used for 24/7 settlement, for reducing counterparty risk, for really ensuring that if you're trying to send money from A to B, no matter how large that amount is, no matter if you're trying to stream money maybe in real time in tiny increments over the internet, it can all be done. And so at Lightspark, what we focused on when working with enterprise customers is actually identifying what are the gaps for graduating the Lightning Network into something that can solve an array of issues that corporations all over the globe experience with money flows. What's interesting is that the technology has always been extremely promising, but there were some missing elements, and I'm sure we'll talk about those. First of all, you have to ensure that the network can be capital efficient, right? So if you're talking about enterprise movements of value, enterprises care a lot about liquidity and capital efficiency in their treasury management, in their overall operations across many different currencies. Now, Bitcoin has this massive advantage of being extremely liquid. So people often don't realize that over the last 10 years, there's one digital asset and one digital asset only that has global liquidity, has clear regulatory certainty, and it has created a really strong network of on and off ramp. That asset is Bitcoin. And it is also the first asset that when you look at global custodians, banks, and other traditional financial institutions, it's the first asset that they're comfortable exposing their clients to. Everything else is still in this aura of ambiguity. Just look at the events in the recent weeks, for example, in the United States around, is this a security or not? Is this asset going to be able to be used for settlement and for payments? So again, as you solve some of those challenges on the technical level and some of those on the capital efficiency, suddenly you have a network where moving value can be instantaneous, moving value can be open and interoperable, which means that different participants can talk the same language on the same rails, and you're not building anymore an antiquated infrastructure that's been around for decades in many countries, including the United States. So that's kind of what we're excited to work on at Lightspark. There's other areas of gaps that are really important as you're going to an institutional clientele. Think about compliance. The crypto ecosystem often hasn't built yet all the right tools to ensure that a regulated financial institution. We onboarded the first regulated bank on Lightning, Xapo Bank, which is based in Europe, and then after the first the leading digital asset exchange in the Middle East, Rain. And these are institutions that have to meet at all times their regulatory obligations. And so that money flow not only needs to be instantaneous, needs to be fast and capital efficient, but also needs to be compliant, right? So that's kind of table stakes. But as you bring all those pieces together, you suddenly realize that, whether you're a traditional bank, financial institution, or a large enterprise, now you have a new set of rails. These rails are programmable. They have all sort of functionality that you didn't have before, and they're using a settlement asset that doesn't have any regulatory uncertainty. So again, we're truly excited about Bitcoin, the asset. We're even more excited about Bitcoin, the network. And we're seeing more and more interest by institutions that really deal with cross-border money flows all the time in lowering the cost of those flows, in making them real time, in building new experiences around them, right? So it's kind of ironic that many decades into the internet, we can all send pictures, digital information in real time. Sending money is still so painful, so high cost, so prone to friction. And of course, that affects a lot of segments that tend to be also unbanked and underbanked. But even think about straight up corporations are often paying way too much for money flows today.
Thank you, Christian. Obi, what are the Bitcoin companies building that could be leveraged by financial institutions and corporations and inspire new innovative services?
Okay, thanks for that. I think the answers already have given us an indication. But I think something's really important to understand that's commonly misunderstood with Bitcoin, which is that Bitcoin and the Bitcoin adjacent ecosystem works today. There is no additional DeFi token required to be able to do anything that you want to do. But you have the other added benefit. You have a truly decentralized environment, but with no compromises. Now, the reason why that's the truth, but that knowledge is not widely distributed because it is truly decentralized. So there is no marketing team. There is no company that runs it. So there's no one to market that. However, we have the benefit of, for various reasons, one of them being things like the BlackRock ETF, there's going to be a ton of new eyeballs coming into the space and realizing that actually anything that you want to be done that you would normally use Web 2.0, the web, or you would use crypto can actually be done today, or by that point in time, could have been done for several months, if not years, whether it's micropayments, whether it's additional functionality or features. So that's the first thing to really understand. And why that's the case is because first you have Bitcoin, but on top of that, you have this layer, which is Lightning, which gives you the ability to send transactions at very low cost, at very high speed, in matters of seconds, if not less, for fractions of a penny anywhere in the world. So you have to think about all the implications of that. You have then technologies like Fedimint, and we might mention it here, another Nostr, which is also a Bitcoin adjacent technology, which allow you to add expressivity. You might call it DeFi or additional logic, etc., to the systems that you're running. So that once you have logic, and again, it allows you to scale to billions of users. So once you have logic, i.e. business logic, plus the ability to transfer value and information around at low cost and a high speed, all running on a decentralized base, you can imagine there is really nothing that you cannot do on the web or any other system. Now, how a business is using it today? Well, I like the categories that Jay had at the beginning. You have the first area is related to custody, because this is a valuable asset and it's increasing in value. And then there's usage, it's in the industrial use cases. And then you're seeing this banking the unbanked or the debanked use case. So briefly on the custody, you're seeing people set up, instead of providing, outsourcing the custody to third parties, it's possible using concepts like multi-signature and concepts like Fedimint and Lightning and Bitcoin to be able to custody within your company. So your company takes control of its own treasury management, potentially with complex treasury management rules where certain people can make certain payments with different cutoffs, etc., meeting the requirements of your business. So that's one whole set of work that's happening. Then there's obviously payments. I won't go into that because you've got a number of people who know about payments and Lightning in great detail. And then there's banking the unbanked and debanked. And by debanked, I mean people who are living under the yoke of authoritarian regimes and dictatorships, for example. They may have banking there, but they cannot use it because to use it would put them and their friends and family in danger. This is more than half the world, by the way. And again, people are living in the global south is also more than half the world. Combined, it's the vast majority of the world. Now, we're working with NGOs and human rights defenders groups to be able to set people up with wallets at very low cost, but having the level of services that they expect from banking systems or custodial systems here, being able to have communication and with inside their communities or their companies and corporations, but knowing that their company is in control of the communication. It's not outsourced to a third party who may or may not be overseeing that communication. So if you want control of your communication or control of your capital, you can do that with on Bitcoin or Bitcoin adjacent services. And then there's some ideas that you may not expect related to this. So just a couple of examples, because again, anything that you can do on the web could be done within the Bitcoin ecosystem now. We're seeing people looking at setting up pensions and annuities using what you might call smart contracts running on top of Fedimint, etc. You're seeing people looking at putting in arbitration systems using Fedimint, Lightning, and Bitcoin. And we've recently just coming to the end of a hackathon related to how we can combine AI with Bitcoin as well. We're calling it AI for all. And again, we're seeing a lot of really interesting ways. And instead of paying lump sums for AI, why don't I pay exactly the amount leveraging the Lightning Network for what I need and no more? So those are just some examples. But as I said, the sky's the limit.
Thank you very much, Obi. Very enlightening. And maybe now that we've have taken a look at an overview of the different use cases, maybe let's deep dive on what would be the most relevant business-related, Bitcoin-related business models for financial institutions and corporations. And maybe with Julia, and how could these institutions partner with companies like yours?
Yeah, for sure. So it was talked about a little bit, but I'll reiterate on just holding Bitcoin in your company treasury. River's obviously a Bitcoin company. We've seen the value of this ourselves, and more we're seeing adoption there. River started and we were serving individuals who were orange pilled, who wanted Bitcoin on their personal balance sheets. And many of those folks actually ran banks or they ran funds, and they'd hold it personally. But if you talk to them about, hey, what about your bank holding Bitcoin? It was like an absolute non-starter. I even had a bank CEO in my early days at River who ran miners in his basement, but still was not open to having his financial institution be involved in Bitcoin. And in the last few years, we're starting to see that conversation really change. And I think some of that is due to some of the financial woes that we've seen early on with SVB failing. Anybody who was running their payroll or their FinOps through them suddenly realized, oh, if I have Bitcoin on my balance sheet, now I have an asset that's in my control and I can immediately make payroll and pay my vendors. And so I think the first step is just to start holding Bitcoin on your balance sheet and see the value of that. Now, for banks and financial institutions, an obvious model is to start offering Bitcoin related products. There's still so much more adoption and more distribution that is needed. We've obviously seen Fidelity, BlackRock, they're getting more involved in the space, but I would say there's still a lot of room for more players to start offering Bitcoin products. We can also talk payments, which hopefully Ryan will also go into. But one way, if you're not running a financial institution and you're just running a business, consider offering Bitcoin payments or accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment alongside the euro, alongside the US dollar. If you look back, think of it as a new payment innovation or payment channel. The companies that were early to offer PayPal as a form of payment, it was an amplifier to their business. It wasn't directly a Bitcoin business model, but it very much was a way that they were interacting with the space and ultimately grew their business. Another analogy you could use is folks who built mobile apps early in the early days for their business. They were early adopters of that technology, and I see offering or accepting Bitcoin payments as another way to just amplify your business.
Thank you, Julia. Well, Ryan, you've been mentioned many times. What are the Bitcoin use cases your organization is focusing on right now? And what is their potential of disruption for institutions?
Great, thanks so much. So our CEO at Lightning Labs, Elizabeth Stark, has said, for years, and the company was founded in 2016. The two areas in which Lightning is going to take off is first, inclusion into the financial system for those who don't have access to financial services, and second, payments use cases that were just previously impossible on Visa. And so I think, especially since 2021, when El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, we've seen huge growth in the first category, right? In payments and financial inclusion for people, in Brazil, in Nigeria, in the Philippines, in Thailand, all over the world, who now all of a sudden can, just make payments on the internet and transfer value peer to peer without anybody's permission, without anybody stopping them. And that is just with Bitcoin, the asset, over Lightning. So one way in which Lightning Labs is really hoping to accelerate that trend is we're developing a new protocol called the Taproot Assets Protocol, which will allow for stablecoins and fiat-backed stablecoins in particular to be transferred over to the Lightning Network. So while we're all Bitcoiners on this call, I do think one thing that is undeniable in this space is that stablecoins have product market fit. I think there's $85 billion worth of Tether that's been issued, and a significant portion of that as well in USDC and some of the other ones. And so allowing the best of both worlds, specifically for these emerging markets users, where they can have the global reach, the instant settlement, and the extremely low fees of Lightning, but with a unit of account that they're comfortable with in terms of the US dollar or any sort of local fiat currency, I think is a really powerful combination, and something that we're really excited about. And one way to frame this is, again, if we think of the Lightning Network as disrupting the card networks, the Visas, the MasterCards, the American Express, et cetera, Lightning right now only supports one currency, Bitcoin, whereas these other card networks support 180 plus. And so this new protocol, this new addition, we think will kind of level the playing field and really open up the addressable market of Lightning for payments. And so then on the second category, the payments use cases that were previously impossible. Right, Obi just touched on it, where there's obviously a huge trend in AI right now, and from kind of the inception of Lightning Labs, enabling machine-to-machine payments has been in the company's DNA. Our CTO first got interested in Bitcoin, thinking about how if he was driving an autonomous car, could he pay somebody who was going slow in front of him to let him pass, right? And how would his car make that direct payment? So machine-to-machine payments have long been in our DNA, and it just seems like this AI wave are finally the type of machines who should need to have payments capabilities. As Obi said, there's a great hackathon going on right now, AI for All, trying to bring kind of the Bitcoin communities and the AI developer communities together. But just from a fundamental first principles basis, and I'm actually, Obi, going to steal your quote. If you had an AI agent that was working on your behalf, booking reservations, buying groceries, et cetera, if it doesn't have the ability to make payments, it's kind of limited in what it can do, right? It always has to come back to you for permission to actually take action, right? If you give an AI agent, a Lightning wallet, you give it agency. And I think that that's a really important thing that, for this new technology to take the next step, it's going to need. But really importantly, you wouldn't give, some software program that's autonomous running in the cloud your credit card number, right? Because then it could send your whole credit card balance. And in particular, you wouldn't want that entity to give your credit card number to another AI agent that's not under your control, right? You would want more programmatic restrictions. You would want more control over exactly what that can do. And that is the type of capabilities that a digitally native programmatic payment network like Lightning can enable, right? So we're really excited about kind of the programmatic payments and how that can really 10x, 100x total Lightning volume, where we already have really good traction with just emerging markets payments, cross-border payments, vanilla Bitcoin payments. And then the final one is open social media, right? If people are addicted to Twitter like I am, they will know, or X, whatever it's called nowadays, they will notice that things have gotten a little weird in the social media space. There are new kind of Bitcoin adjacent protocols like Nostr, like the DID protocol, which are all about, how can we rebuild the social media experience that everybody's used to, but with open protocols where you're not, your data isn't controlled by a corporation, but instead is controlled by yourself, and that you're not, at risk of censorship or deplatforming because you're operating on a protocol. And so we think that, those type of protocols will need native incentive mechanisms. They will need native payments, and Lightning is already, at the forefront of enabling that. So I think, those three kind of are what we're calling the next frontiers of Lightning. Taproot Assets Protocol, bringing stablecoins and making Bitcoin a multi-asset network. The AI agents enabling machine-to-machine payments, and then open social media. And we think that there's tons of room for disruption, tons of room for growth there, and that's all riding on top of the existing traction that we have just by enabling an open source payment network for global value transfer.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other comment from other speakers before we move on to the implementation side of things? Maybe Jay, you have any comment on the use cases that have been mentioned, and on the institutional clients side as well, on how they want to gain exposure? How do you see the demand playing out, and how they might gain exposure to Bitcoin?
I mean, everything that was discussed here, I mean, this group just killed it. I mean, there's so much that we could talk about here from a financial institution standpoint, and the systems that need to be set up and the approach they may take. And but it's very clear to me that there's going to be a tremendous amount of capital that's going to come into this ecosystem. I don't mean from an investment standpoint, but I mean from a financial services standpoint. The institutions are going to get more actively involved. They're going to be large pools of capital. They're going to be required. And I think that as the use cases and demand start to transition from traditional, from where they exist today to where they're heading, that companies that are at the forefront of that are going to really benefit from it. So there's going to be huge disruption that's created through all of this. And so identifying the right vendors and partners in this space, whether it's wealth management and asset management, whether it's payments, Lightning, Lightspark, all the people that are on the call today are all experts in these areas. And so I think that's the real issue that I would just address. And it's a different ecosystem than people are used to, but what can be done is amazing, and it's going to be done. And so I think the getting in front of all of that and being intelligent and learning, doing a lot of learning right now is essential. And then maybe leveraging some of the existing companies that are in the space versus trying to build things out yourself to take a first, dive in, are I think essential. At least they have been for us.
Thank you, Jay. Maybe Christian, on your experience with your clients, I've seen that Lightspark has been leading the way also with partnering with banks on developing their offering, leveraging Lightning. What is your vision on the key use cases where you see the most potential over the next years playing out for financial institutions or corporations?
We've seen a lot of interest in cross-border money movement, all the way from the small size to tiny transactions. So imagine streaming value in real time across borders, whether it's a salary or an exchange between two corporations as goods are exchanged live in some other dimension. Can you actually pay them by the second? That's quite innovative technology that is not possible in traditional rails. And so what we've seen has excited a lot of the enterprise players is not only removing friction and lowering cost when it comes to value transfer across borders, but also new modalities. Now, there were a number of problems that we had to solve on the engineering side to make that all possible. And some of the things that we've noticed the partners are particularly interested in is solving complex issues around addressing. Like how do you make sure that if I'm sending a payment, it can be done almost like selecting an email, something as simple as that, while at the same time verifying all the important compliance information from travel rule to the beneficiaries involved, everything that happens on traditional payment rails. How do we port it on these faster, more efficient crypto rails? I would say that enterprise customers are looking at this in many different ways. take large-scale digital platforms that have millions of, if not billions of users, right? For them, having a payment experience that is embedded within what they're already doing every day, it's a massive advantage. So today, any platform that deals with complex money flows between many users on one side and maybe many creators on the others, or drivers and riders, marketplaces of all types, a lot of their profits is actually lost due to the traditional payment infrastructure. Accepting payments or dispersing payouts all across the globe is extremely complex. And more so when you're aggregating maybe inputs of payments from many small users in different regions and dispersing them again to many other entities in other places. Lightning makes all of that extremely simple. Again, it's a modern protocol that the Lightning Labs team and others have been building out as an open source protocol. So something that anyone can contribute and extend. It's interoperable from day one. So another thing that we hear over and over from enterprise customers is like, today, if you think about your experience between different digital wallets, you can send money from digital wallet A to digital wallet B. Often there's reasons why it's been designed that way, but I think we're now ready for a future where people should be able to send value between all these other otherwise non-connected entities. So interoperability is another big selling point to enterprise customers, because they need that in their payment experiences. Beyond that, I think there's a lot of excitement around new types of use cases, especially when it comes to digital goods and the purchase of digital goods. We already hinted at AI, but even before we get to AI, there's all sort of digital transactions today where there's too much friction. Just think about your traditional experience when you hit a digital paywall and you're trying to read the news. How much of a decay do you have in readership and in attention because of payment friction? So I think together with all the participants on this call, we can really remove that friction. Now, there's some hard technical and economic challenges that need to be solved for Bitcoin really to scale and support billions of volumes of TPV, but we're working on those. And I think over time, you'll see that people will realize that instead of coalescing around closed loop systems that maybe are based on a blockchain, but they're still kind of a walled garden with a different owner, we should all be building on truly open protocols. That's what made the internet so successful. Think about email. Email is an extremely successful protocol. We still rely on it today, despite improvements in messaging and all sort of new technologies that we have. I think we need the same for money. And Lightning is actually, we believe strongly, is the right answer for that.
Thank you very much, Christian. Very clear. Obi, I know that Fedi has been at the forefront as well of developing new types of technologies. Before going on to the implementation side, you have been developing federating operating systems, not only to custody and use digital assets such as Bitcoin, but also the personal data. What might be the impact for communities, for public institutions of these new technologies that you are providing, and in terms of concrete use cases that you see as a priority for your company?
So, as I said, the impact is that we allow any sort of organization, any sort of company to take control of their own money, of their own data, and their own digital lives. So at the moment, you may outsource that to a third party. You have data issues related to that. It may be that others can make you lose access to your own money, your own data, or your own communication, or they can oversee that. You may be discussing very sensitive information. What you would want to be able to do is have an experience that is as simple as if you're using it from a hosted service, software as a service website, but run internally within your organization, so you're in control. So that you know for sure that no one else is able to take your money away from you, or take your data away from you, or eavesdrop on your communications. Things that are very valuable for any community, any person, but clearly for any company. So those are just some of the things, and that's the level of impact. It also has incredible cost benefits because you're not having to pay a third party. There's also efficiencies in terms of execution because it can run locally within your organization. And because of the technologies that are now prevalent and ever more prevalent in the Bitcoin ecosystem, it can be incredibly easy to do. It's something that can be set up in very short order, and either you can trustlessly outsource elements of it, for example, the management of the Lightning Gateway, or you can run it internally with the same efforts it needs to run a set-top box, but you have all this functionality. So if it's that easy to do and that empowering, why outsource it with all the risks related to a third party? I did want to just, before, to go back to a couple of things that people said that really resonated, and I think it's worth restating. One, as a community, the Bitcoin ecosystem is a community that works together. There isn't this negative incentives for each person to create their own token, which they then want to be the #1 token to rule them all. And therefore that leads to these negative incentives where each new token, each new project fights with the other one. We are working together. The AI for All example, many of people on this call have helped fund that, and as have many other people in the Bitcoin ecosystem. This is just one example of how we always work together because we're all interested in one thing above all, which is leveling up humanity. That is why we're doing what we're doing. We're all mission driven. So this is a really big part of why it becomes very clear once you get into the Bitcoin ecosystem, why open standards, working to win by making sure everyone else wins, is the only way to go.
Thank you, Obi. Julia, Ryan, any comment on this before we go on to the next section?
Yeah, I just love that comment from Obi, and that's 100% been my experience since joining the space. The space is growing faster than any of us can acquire clients at that same pace. So we're really here to just like make the pool get bigger. And so that's like been something that's so exciting. And a lot of the companies that are even just listed here on this screen, like we're all partnering, we're in close communication, and we're all rooting for each other because the bigger win here is that Bitcoin wins. And inherently, the companies that are doing right in this space, they're going to win as well.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you,
mean,
Julia.
the lesson over the last 30, 40 years of history is that open protocols, open standards win. And I think as well, like the incentive alignment of, as Julia said, all of us partnering together to, upgrade the world to a Bitcoin standard and to Bitcoin infrastructure is extremely powerful. And the more talented, every year, more and more talented people join, our ragtag, group of misfits working on this project. Every year, more and more people join. Every year, the talent pool gets upgraded. Every year as well, we just continue to succeed, and I see no reason for that to stop as time passes on. So, open protocols, open standards win because the incentive alignment and the talent accumulation just continues to grow.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and all for this very interesting discussion. And to highlight as well the importance of open source protocols and the possibility to build on it and partner, even if you are companies within the same space, you are building on open source protocols, and financial institutions, corporations can do so as well. Now moving on to the risks to be taken into account. Maybe starting with Jay, what are the key risks that need to be taken into account for institutions that are willing to gain Bitcoin exposure? And how do you work through that with your clients?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting area because I'm both an institution myself as an investor that runs a fund investing in the space, and then as from a wealth management standpoint, we're also thinking about how to provide solutions to the ecosystem, whether it be institutional or retail, to give them access to the space. So from my standpoint, the number one issue, and this plays into our area of expertise, is the volatility of the asset. So Blue Square's experience in risk management and trading strategy standpoint, and so we could dive into that. This isn't what this discussion is about, but clearly, I think last year Fidelity had an institutional study about adoption, and that was the biggest issue that prevented people from getting into the space. And I think there are ways to very simply and easily address that and still get, and I'm talking now from an investment standpoint, the exposure. Having said that, from institutions delivering, and again, from my area of expertise, investment solutions to clients, this is a key issue. So, like in our situation, we started with a familiar structure, a fund structure, and then we're in the process of transitioning to SMAs, or separately managed accounts, which wind up becoming more complicated because you start getting into this custody issue, right? And so the custody of the asset is an issue where I know you guys are assisting a lot of the banking infrastructure with, and because you have regulated custody, which is an institutional custody of digital assets, and then you have investors that want to do self-custody of the asset. So being able to provide advice and guidance to those investors and those financial institutions who aren't custodying the assets. So it'll be very interesting to see how that whole ecosystem is evolving. And the same thing on the custody side. It's one of the biggest issues that we face is making sure that in working with a number of different custodians, that we're never in a position where if one of the custodians has an issue, that our assets are ever locked with that custodian, right? And so, talking about these multi-key solutions and different ways of approaching that aspect of the ecosystem is where we've been spending a lot of our time and energy. And I think we're still very, very young in the evolution of that, both from a regulatory standpoint, especially in the US, but also from a structural standpoint, because traditional assets that are omnibus, that are broker-dealer, or that we're all familiar with, this is a different asset class. It's a different infrastructure. And so until we have stocks, bonds, and commodities that are actually digitized and trading on the same custodial, or tokenized and trading on the same sort of custodial infrastructure, there's opportunities and challenges so far as implementing solutions in that space. And I think there's a lot of interesting work being done. And again, like everybody said, I'm happy to share what we're seeing and what we're thinking about and how we're approaching the space. And I think that's really the key when we think about the whole thing, because from our standpoint, with our fund, we've been working with a number of institutions and setting up like sort of feeder funds so that people can access our solutions and dip a toe in the water. But whether you're developing in-house solutions, or you're going to partner with firms like mine or River or others that are out there, finding solutions that you can plug into and deliver either on a white label basis, or if you're going to go and build out the whole thing on your own. I think the great thing about this ecosystem is that everybody's willing to share, partner, and really give an assessment of their experiences. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity. I think that if you don't move quickly, you could be left behind. But in the same regard, you need to make sure that you're doing things in a well thought through and with partners who have experience in this space. Because as we've already seen, there have been a number of companies through this bear market that were significantly impaired and or bankrupt. And so we just really want to be smart about how we get exposure to these assets and how we provide access to them for clients. And so it'll be really interesting. I will say one last thing. While BlackRock and their ETF, I think spot ETF, and we'll see how long again it takes to get approval, but I think it's a great thing. One of the things that I've come to truly understand about this asset and what that sort of structure doesn't allow for, it'll bring a tremendous amount of capital into the ecosystem, but what it won't do is allow you to own the underlying asset. And so everything that we're doing, we want, and I think what most of the people on this call would agree, is that if you're going to own Bitcoin, you don't want the financial exposure to the asset. You want to own the underlying asset one way or the other. And so that's the exciting part of what we're doing. That's the interesting part of what we're doing. And then I think there are just all sorts of new and interesting and exciting ways to invest in this asset class. Some of them that River is exploring with the mining and things of that nature. And then there'll be a host of others that'll wind up coming on the Lightning Network, so far as potentially just banking services that are offered, or potentially even one day individuals being their own bank. I mean, that's certainly where we're headed. So how financial institutions can implement different strategies to participate and create businesses around those ecosystems, I think will be very interesting and create lots of opportunity, and also sort of like what we're seeing in the EV industry right now. If we're not quick to adopt, some of the old guard could be left behind.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for this very practical and institutional point of view on how to manage risks and gain a Bitcoin exposure. Maybe now that we've discussed risks, and feel free to mention more risks as we go, maybe let's have a look at the main challenges, and starting with you, Christian. The main challenges faced by your institutional clients willing to provide Bitcoin-related services to their customers, and how do you at Lightspark solve this challenge?
Yes, I'll start actually with the risk. I think for anyone that is serious about leading in the digital asset space, the biggest risk today is not building on a truly open protocol. So again, there's a lot of noise, I think, when it comes to crypto and digital assets, and I think we need to draw an important distinction between Bitcoin and pretty much everything else. But conditional on an enterprise realizing that they do want to build on a truly open protocol. When we started our journey on Lightning, we identified a number of problems and categories that really needed to be improved and addressed. The first one was just ease of use. It was extremely cumbersome for any enterprise that wants to be in control of their journey when they connect to the Lightning Network to connect to it and really use it in a seamless way. So our first product, Lightspark Connect, is essentially your gateway onto the Lightning Network. Again, enterprise grade, able to scale to millions of users, very large transaction volumes and all that. The second problem we identified, I'm an economist, so I was kind of biased. The one thing that is unique about the Lightning Network is that it is a payment channel-based system. So think of it a little bit like corresponding banking. You're locking liquidity into these channels with your counterparts, and this actually will resonate with all the participants that deal with treasury management on a regular basis. But one of the things we wanted to do was to make Lightning actually very capital efficient. For this network to meet and compete, outcompete the standards of payment systems today, it needs to be cheaper, faster, and also more capital efficient. It really needs to ensure that liquidity is where it's needed, only when it is needed. That really started our journey actually into AI and advanced models on that end, in trying to almost predict where will our customers need liquidity and when, so that we can place it in the right moment in time on the network. That's been a pretty fruitful journey. Over the course of about a year, we were able to improve the capital efficiency of our stack more than 15 times. And that closes really the gap between Lightning and any other modern payment rail. So now you can have real-time settlement, instantaneous delivery of your payment with very high success rates, and you don't need to lock a lot of Bitcoin in flight when you're doing that. We think these are the kind of innovations that are really important in unlocking kind of an enterprise-grade experience, and in really closing the gap between Lightning and what people actually need to do often, which is just move value. Another area that our enterprise customers have been quite excited about is that they are often in control. They operate on and off ramps. What do I mean by that? They're able to then convert from Bitcoin back to, say, dollars or euros or pounds or other currencies. When you combine something such as Bitcoin and the rails behind it with really efficient on and off ramps, suddenly you're not talking just about the movement of Bitcoin. And Ryan already hinted at this with the future where you may have stable coins, but even before we have stable coins, you can send, say, from the US to Europe actually faster, more efficiently over Lightning than you can do today over Swift or any other legacy infrastructure. The way you do it is, you go from dollars to Bitcoin and the spreads are really thin. Again, this is the most liquid digital asset market in the world. and then you convert back from Bitcoin to Euro. Suddenly you have payment rails that anyone can connect to, anyone can use, that are just available and done just works. So it's almost kind of magic, and we've seen that when partners experience the ability to send something that feels like a fiat payment denominated in their home currency, but is powered by Lightning. Again, a lot of complexity behind the scenes, but some magic that you get really in the user experience, whether you're a traditional financial institution, a digital platform, or even a small and medium business that's trying to accept payments at a lower cost.
Thank you, Christian. Maybe Obi, what do you think about what's been said, and what are the key strategic considerations to keep in mind for an institution willing to provide these services in the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I think the key consideration sort of follows logically on from what's been said. So you're someone who's now made a decision that, sorry, I thought someone said something. So I may have been on mute, but I wasn't, so it's good.
It's okay.
So you're someone who has decided that you want to build something innovative in this space. And you are probably at that initial stage going to look at all cryptocurrencies. As background, as I mentioned briefly, I ran an exchange. It was one of the longest running exchanges in the UK, in Europe, one of the first to be regulated in mainland Europe. And we ended up listing only Bitcoin. And why? Because we took a number of considerations into account. So I don't consider myself a Bitcoin maximalist. I consider myself a Bitcoin rationalist, because I had a rational set of considerations. One, the strength of the or within the community that it was in, the stability and maturity of the protocol. That you have to consider the technical acumen of the team who's working on it. You should consider the functionality made possible by the protocol or the wider ecosystem, and you consider the regulatory clarity. Now, many people in all of those, bar maybe functionality, it was clear that Bitcoin was leaps and bounds beyond every other cryptocurrency. And now, more recently, in the last year or two, because of things like Lightning, now because of things like Fedimint and other Bitcoin adjacent technologies like Nostr, there is no functionality gap. If anything, it's better than any other. So there is no rational, or once you're informed of the actual reality of the situation and you get past the ICO-driven marketing, then there's no rational decision that leads you to analyze any other option than Bitcoin. Once you do that, then you want to decide who do you partner with in the space. And you want to make sure that it's someone, two things. One, someone who's willing and capable of supporting you to achieve what you want to achieve in the time that you need to achieve it. So something, again, in the Bitcoin ecosystem, we call that having a low time preference. It's we as a group of people are people who are willing to take the time to make sure you're serviced to the level you need to be serviced. Now, beyond that, you're going to have the same considerations: the strength of and the stability and maturity of the organization, the technical acumen of the team behind it, the functionality they make possible, and so on. So it's the same clarifications, but now associated to a team or a company. And on this call, you have a number of organizations who tick all those boxes, and there are a number of others within the Bitcoin ecosystem as well. And so, but I would high level, just as a starter for 10, that's what you should consider.
Thank you very much, Obi. Maybe after challenges, risks, and strategic considerations, let's take a look at the concrete technology choices that, as a Bitcoin company providing services in the space, you are making, and starting with Julia. Maybe what are the technology choices that your company has made, River, and how does this impact the way that you provide the services to your clients?
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually a great segue from what Obi was saying around low time preference, which I think was very much River's approach to how it built its infrastructure and our operations, and continues to be how we invest in the company scaling. But Alex Leishman really founded River to build the most secure and user-friendly Bitcoin custody for folks who were not quite ready to self-custody themselves. And so what that meant is we built it ourselves. We built our own and manage our own cold storage infra, and everything else in between, all of our banking partners, all of our financial operations, everything to our customer service team being US based. And then another huge investment we made was on the regulatory and compliance side and getting all of our own money transmissions licenses, which you need to operate in each state in the United States to touch money. And what that meant is that we could have control. We could control keys, we could control money, we could control the information. And so we really reduced third-party risk because we don't have them, at least not in the core functions of our business. And so that's something that I think other companies have taken a few shortcuts in the space in order to go to market quickly, which I totally understand. But at the same time, it means their consumers don't really understand who is holding their Bitcoin. And so for us, it was massively important to make sure that we had that control, and we built everything from the ground up, knew exactly how it functioned, knew exactly the security, and could maintain it going forward. In fact, when I was entering this space, if folks remember, for anyone who's been in financial services, in 2015, 2016, lending fintech was all the rage. And what all those companies ended up being was they were honestly just nice websites on top of Wells Fargo, on like top of the exact same like old broken system. And so as I started looking at Bitcoin companies, I wanted someone who was not that, who is not just a marketing website with good branding on top of someone else's infrastructure that had already existed. And like River is that absolutely at its core. So the other part of River is our Lightning infrastructure business. And we took the exact same approach. In fact, in 2019, our Bitcoin engineers wanted to offer Lightning payments, but nobody was really offering that infrastructure. So we built it ourselves. We were the first US company to start offering Lightning payments to consumers as a brokerage. And then our first customer for our Lightning infra was a country, in part because we had some of the most robust infrastructure that existed out there. And so today, still we manage all this infra, and we really see it as a way to allow other people to leverage what we're doing to offer Lightning payments. So we have some of the highest payment success rates. We run some of the largest nodes. Christian was talking about capital efficiency. We also built our Lightning product differently, where River deploys its own capital into channels, not our customers. So River is really offering the most capital efficient implementation of the Lightning network for a company. So really just running our own infra in-house to really reduce risk and to give like the best user experience both to consumers as well as to other companies who are trying to build in the space.
Thank you so much, Julia. We've talked a lot about how Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem provides now great solutions for institutions and corporations to be involved, and how also Bitcoin can be different from other types of assets or networks. But maybe Ryan, what do you see as well as current limits and gaps for Bitcoin institutional adoption, and how does your organization respond with solutions to overcome these challenges?
More than anything else, I think the gap is on education and understanding, right? We already have really large institutions operating on the Lightning Network and on Bitcoin daily, right? Block, Cash App, Square, whatever they're called nowadays, right? You know, they have 60 million monthly active users in the US that have a Lightning wallet today, right? Like we already have crossed a lot of these barriers with different entities. And so I think more than anything else, it's just education and each institution getting comfortable kind of with their own internal controls and compliance teams and other things like that with how Bitcoin and Lightning work. Because I think from a fundamentals perspective, one thing that I always come back to is, you know, I think the cheapest payment you can make on the Visa network is 10 cents base fee plus 1.5%, right? On Lightning, like on average, I think the fee that you pay is below 15 bips per transaction, right? With a base fee of 1 Satoshi, which could be, you know, I don't know, is that a 100th of a penny or something like that? So from a fundamentals basis, this is already a more efficient, cheaper global payments network than the incumbents. And the only thing really stopping us is broader adoption. And the only thing stopping broader adoption is education and understanding. And so our strategy at Lightning Labs is, we build open source software, we build developer tools, and we enable companies like River, companies like Fedi, companies like Lightspark, and many, many, many more to go out and acquire the end users and bring them to the network and bring the volume to the network, right? So we are all about developer adoption because we cannot, as a small team of 30, 31, something like that, we can't solve all of the problems for every institution because they are many and they are varied, and we're going after every financial institution on the planet to get onto the network. However, we can build enough tools and enough foundational infrastructure to where specialists like River, Lightspark, Fedi, and many others can go out and directly solve these problems for institutions. So I think Obi's point earlier about deciding, first, what is your Lightning strategy, and then figuring out which companies do you want to partner with and which companies can best solve your unique set of problems and get you on to these networks and get you on to Bitcoin infrastructure and the Bitcoin standard, I think is the right strategy. Because from a fundamentals perspective, the tooling is all there and we already have the proof points, right? Julia has a country as a customer, right? We have all of the tools to solve all of the problems that these institutions want. It is just a matter of communicating those requirements and personalizing the final solutions for them. So I'm really excited about the future. I think this kind of, in general in Bitcoin, we think in cycles, and I think this next cycle is going to be one where, last cycle with El Salvador's Bitcoin legal tender announcement, people kind of woke up to the fact that, Lightning, 1, exists, and 2, really works, and people are, 3, people are using it in the real world today. And I think this next cycle, we're going to see institutions realize, oh man, not only does it work and exist, but this really solves big problems for us and really helps improve our operational efficiencies. And operating on this open standard is just much nicer than having to deal with kind of a bunch of the legacy infrastructure that we have to deal with today.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Before going on to the next section around the questions the audience might have, and again, please feel free to drop your comments, questions in the comments, and we'll make sure to answer them. Maybe before, because not everyone got chance to talk about the limits and gaps. Maybe starting with Jay, what do you see as current limits, gaps within the Bitcoin ecosystem, and that could also be value pools for emerging startups or new financial institutions or corporations or other investors willing to position themselves in the space?
So again, taking it from an investment firm standpoint and a financial institution standpoint myself, I'm jealous of Julia and River because we're providing advice and guidance in the United States, and we're a regulated entity in that regard. So we can't build our own tech in-house. So I love that they're doing that. And so there are a lot of companies that are doing this. And so to pivot slightly and come back, there was a great, I don't know if everybody saw this on X or Twitter yesterday, but there was a great piece about Bitcoin that was released that BlackRock had done, talking about the optimal asset allocation for Bitcoin. And they were saying it was like 85% is where they came up with versus 15% for stocks and bonds, which is obviously an absurdity for anyone managing money institutionally, but very interesting from the standpoint of talking about, what the characteristics of are. So as financial institutions, I think figuring out ways to deliver investment solutions to the marketplace that can properly address the volatility of the asset, because if we want people to have more than 1 or 2% exposure, and of course, no one's going to recommend an 85% exposure to an allocation to Bitcoin, but maybe it's something along the lines of 5, 10, or 15 for institutions or individuals to stay invested. They can't have the volatility of 80% drawdown. It's not going to work. So that's one area. The second area is along just the technology to deliver these institutions, these solutions to market. especially around, I'll say it again, custody, and around how we create advice and guidance for clients that for both those that are in institutional custody and those that are self-custodying. So the ecosystem seems to every 3 to 6 months be evolving at an unbelievably rapid rate. So I know for myself, this is an area that I spend a tremendous amount of time, and we all have our own pain points so that we all get very focused on trying to resolve those. And so I think that's where, not to, tout a censure, but where companies who are consulting companies that can provide financial institutions with access to and knowledge on whatever their pain points on the most up-to-date and newest technologies, because they're coming about fast and furious in this ecosystem, is an unbelievably important component to what's going on. So for us, that's the issue. We identify our pain points. We want to be in the ecosystem. We want to be a leader in the space. But then to everyone else's point, we need to leverage what the other work that other companies are doing, because we can't solve every problem ourselves. And so we need to really leverage the ecosystem that's evolving. And it's evolving quickly, and it's awesome, because every time you think you have a problem, someone solved it, and then you can just move on to the next one. So I think it's exciting, and it's interesting, and from that standpoint, I think that's probably the easiest way to go about it. Is just really just have to keep evolving very quickly and iterating very quickly.
Awesome, thank you, Jay. Christian, any thoughts on what's been said before?
Yes, I mean, another important trend, and you heard the word custody a number of times here, but I think it's important to zoom out for a second. So some of you will definitely remember the meltdown of FTX. FTX was a regulated institution in the United States. They have money transmission licenses, but as the evidence emerged around that entire situation, it's always risky to trust third-party custodians, no matter what regulator or how much oversight there might be. And so one of the things we've been observing, especially when you're thinking about global custodians, highly regulated institutions, there's no future where they will not want control of their own custody. And especially when it comes to Bitcoin, we think that self-custody and starting that journey into controlling that asset yourself on-prem is extremely important. Now, as it turns out, there's some hard technical challenges when it comes to self-custody and Bitcoin on the Lightning Network, and that's something that we solve with our Wallet SDK and some new products that we're working on right now. But if we want these rails to really become useful, for example, for brokers and major exchanges, then there's really a need for robust custody solutions where these companies will want full control of the asset, again, so that in a crisis, if they need to move it and everything else is failing, they can still do it. They're still in control of their own journey. So we strongly believe that the importance of developing software all the way to AI that allows you to support payments while still retaining control over the Bitcoin or the assets that you're moving on this network is really the game changer. We've had banks for centuries, but one of the key innovations here is that when you're holding Bitcoin, when you're controlling that new digital asset, it's actually yours. That, of course, introduces all sort of new challenges from a security and risk perspective, but we've seen more and more institutional understanding of those. And so I think one of the innovations here is going to be a future where no matter, again, if you're a bank, financial institution, broker, large enterprise with many global locations, you'll be a lot more in control of your own destiny when it comes to treasury management, liquidity management, and also global payments.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Christian, for this perspective. Obi, maybe any concluding thoughts on this?
Some amazing thoughts there, and so many. I'll just pick a few. One, just the last mentioned. I think there's going to be different solutions for different people, and that's the beauty about this space. If people want institutional grade custody with a trustworthy provider who's been in the space for a long time, you have organizations like River. If you want to have company level custody where the company takes control of their own custody and they're comfortable with that, then the products that Fedi is launching can help you in that regard. And there's a spectrum in between. But one thing I wanted to just reiterate again, and it came across this, and when you're thinking about implementation and the comments around education, there are still people who think that Bitcoin can only do 7 transactions per second. No, that's not been the case for a long, long time. It can do It can do way more. There are still people who think that you cannot add its complex functionality and capabilities on top of Bitcoin. No, the wider Bitcoin ecosystem allows this. So it's really important to understand that the world has changed and it's changing at an ever more accelerating rate. But Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing team because it is truly decentralized. Now you're getting larger and larger organizations like ourselves, when I mean ourselves, everybody on this call, who are able to make people aware in the wider space that all of this is the case. And so that's going to become increasingly clear over the coming months and years. But anything that you want to be able to do, when you would have used the web or you would have used an alternative, you can do on Bitcoin, and it'll be faster, it'll be better, and it'll be more decentralized without any single point of trust, if that's what you want, or with very trusted institutional grade partners, if that's needed as well.
Thank you very much, Obi. Julia?
Yeah, on top of what folks said, and education is huge, I think a gap we have is talent and people.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're talking to folks and want them to be like, go back at your company, be a champion for Bitcoin, like have more folks come into the space, but really like come be a builder in the space. There is so much opportunity here to like, we haven't even dreamed up all the cool things that we're going to build and do and the business models that Bitcoin is going to allow to come into existence. I was at the Bitcoin Miami conference, as I'm sure everyone here was, earlier this year, and one of my Stanford Business School classmates from a long time ago, Jesse Myers, is the COO of OnRamp, which is another Bitcoin company. And he said to me, isn't it insane that we are the only two people from our class who are at this conference who are working in this space? And if you look ahead 15, 20 years from now, a quarter of the class is going to be working in Bitcoin in some way. Like it will be our new leading global financial system, and folks like aren't even really grasping that. So as you're like thinking about your career right now and where you want to work and where you want to build, I know AI is really hot right now, but like low time preference, like come and build and work in Bitcoin.
Thank you so much, Julia. Ryan, to close the loop on this and to transition from what Julia said, what is still required to be built, and what are the kind of breakthrough innovations that are coming at Lightning Labs that could be leveraged in the future by financial institutions and corporations and start experimenting today?
Yeah, I mean, I love and want to echo Julia's point. Again, like there is we just had our all team offsite, and one thing I was kind of telling the team was, nobody knows the total amount of volume that went through the Lightning Network last year. Like it is private and local by nature. Everybody kind of has their individual view, but there is no like kind of one specific number. But I'd be surprised if it was more than $1 billion in total volume. Visa, MasterCard, the card networks generally, debit cards, the Nielsen report said last year did $20 trillion in total volume. So if you say like we were capped at $1 billion and our competition did 20 trillion, like that means there's a 20,000x left in upside, right? For us to kind of fulfill our destiny and disrupt these networks. So like there's tons and tons and tons of upside left in joining the revolution, and we need talented people to come and push this forward, right? And so, Lightspark and River and Fedi are probably hiring for a little bit different profile than the protocol engineers the Lightning Labs is hiring. But I think, there's so much left to be built on the protocol side, on the cryptography side. There's so much left to be built in terms of providing really easy and intuitive user experiences for end users, and making, what is by nature kind of a complicated thing in terms of, a peer-to-peer network, making that really simple, making it look like Venmo or Revolut or, something like that. I think that's one area that the Bitcoin community has generally struggled is with kind of design and user interfaces. So that's something we always need more talent in. I also think just in general, one thing that Obi and I have talked a lot about is that, now that the network works. Like now is a really good time to go out and do the business development, right? To pound the pavement, to go and acquire customers and do customer acquisition and go into these financial institutions and do sales, right? That's another thing that Bitcoiners are not really necessarily super adept at, but that we need people that are, very talented in those areas and have the networks and connections to go out and bring volume and bring users to this network, because it works. The fundamentals are strong. Like the path to disruption is very clear. The upside is huge, and we just need people to come in and do the work. And so I think, this is a great audience to send that message to, because, the path has never been clear and the upside is enormous.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Well, unless there is more questions from the audience, let's start with closing thoughts now. And for everyone, for every speaker, to give its closing thoughts and let us know where and why people can find you. Let's start with Jay.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this event. It's a pleasure to be here, especially to see some of my dear friends who I haven't seen in a little bit. And good luck to all of you out there. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to me in your efforts. You can reach me at jay@bluesquarewealth.com. And for any of the financial institutions that are interested in understanding my journey and anything that I can do to help them as they're implementing their own journeys, we are more than welcome to share and aid and assist. And I just wanted to say one thing. I know we're saying goodbye, but I just wanted to echo Julia and Ryan's comments about the fact that the Bitcoin network with Lightning is faster and cheaper. And the one area we're building out right now, which everyone else on this call except me is working on, are the applications to make it easier to use. And once that happens and this whole thing gets unlocked, it's going to happen quick. It's going to be fast and furious. So I love that everybody's listening and learning, and I would also encourage everyone to get involved as quickly as they can before the ship has proverbially sailed. So thank you for having me, and look forward to these dialogues in the future.
Thank you so much, Jay. It's been fantastic to have you here. Christian?
C. Catalini on Twitter, lightspark.com for all our new product releases. We're currently onboarding, customers that have millions of users onto the Lightning Network. So be ready for, I think, a big jump in activity on Bitcoin and the entire ecosystem. What I would say as a parting thought, bring us interesting problems. We've been talking to countless enterprises all across the globe of all sizes. I would say generally to medium to large. That have issues around liquidity management, treasury management, global payments, and the movements of value of all scales, right? So large payments to tiny micro payments streamed over the web in real time. If you have any of those problems, our team of engineers, which is best in class, would love to talk to you as we're trying to really, focus on our customers. And so that's, I think, what the Lightning Network needs at this stage, which is feedback on what kind of problems can we solve that traditional Rails cannot. So looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Christian. Love to have you on the panel. Obi?
Yeah, so I'm at Obi on Twitter, or x.com now. Yes, because I'm very old. And I'm also obi@fedi.xyz if you want to email me. I repeated, I just want to say at the beginning, middle, and the end, Bitcoin and the ecosystem can do what you need right now. It's just a difference in understanding and knowledge about that fact. As an organization, Fedi wants to be part of that education process. We're planning to hire hundreds of people across the world, especially in some of the new markets of the global south where you see there's a huge opportunity, but worldwide, to educate communities and corporations about the current state. So if you have questions of Bitcoin and Lightning and the ecosystem. So if you have questions about Bitcoin and Lightning and the Bitcoin ecosystem, then we're happy to help you, talk to you, and advise you. So please reach out.
Thank you, Obi. Amazing perspectives from you and the Fedi team. Julia?
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. Please reach me, Julia@river.com. Our website is just river.com. if you want to invest in Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, a consumer institution, don't hesitate to reach out. Also, if you want to consider implementing and integrating with the Lightning Network, definitely let us know. The last thought I'll share is we're all in the space, and you can feel there's like something different right now. People are focused, it's disciplined. There's not a hype out there, but there's like this energy and momentum that really feels like it's building. So come and work with us. Definitely pay attention. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Julia, for bringing all your great energy as well on the panel. That's been great. Ryan?
Yeah, so I'm at Ryan the Gentry on Twitter. Our website is lightning.engineering. And one thing that I do that I offer to, anytime I'm talking to investors, people in the finance industry, people that are looking to kind of get a glimpse of what's happening, is I write our, sometimes monthly newsletter, which is lightninglabs.substack.com. And the purpose of the newsletter is to just summarize all the goings on in the Lightning ecosystem, specifically for folks like our audience. And the kind of standing offer is, if you ever have a question or think any entity in the newsletter is interesting and you want to learn more, hit me on Twitter, email me at ryan@lightning.engineering. I'm always happy to connect folks, always happy to answer questions. And I think, again, echoing Julia, like the energy in this space is really, really good right now. Like we're all, I think, very confident in the foundation that has been laid and very optimistic and very bullish on the new possibilities that are being enabled. The only thing missing is talented people and education and awareness from kind of the entities we're looking to get on board. So, thank you again, Alexander, for having us today. I think this has been a really great discussion with a bunch of really talented people, all of whom I look up to. And, I'm just really excited for the future. We're on this mission to bring Bitcoin to the billions, to upgrade the world to a new financial stack that's open source, that's verifiable. And we are welcoming more talented people and more talented individuals every day. So join us. The future is very bright.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for your perspective and to Lightning Labs as well for not only having the conviction on the future, but as well building on it and building open source infrastructure that everyone here is leveraging and using and sharing. So thank you very much. And thank you to Patrick Bouffartig as well, the president of Paris Blockchain Society, that's been here under the scenes, managing all the discussions and the panel. So thank you to Patrick, to the Paris Blockchain Society for hosting this event, to all our dear panelists today, and of course, last but not least, to all the audience for being here today and sharing this moment together. Feel free to reach out to everyone here on the panel, and let's talk soon. Thank you all very much for being here. Cheers.